I like to think of myself as kind of the cool motorcycle riding old person, even though I don't ride motorcycles anymore, and not the get off my lawn old person. That said, I share the general questioning stance that my generation does when it comes to selfies. I don't know why you do that. And I don't mean you necessarily, but I don't know why those who take lots of selfies take lots of selfies. But I'm not condemning you for it. In other words, just because I don't know why you do it doesn't mean that you're doing it for the wrong reasons. There's a long tradition in communication research called uses and gratifications. And uses and gratifications often examined media use that was kind of bad media use, low culture. Why do people watch soaps? I mean, people get very obsessed with soaps. They think that they're part of them. They engage in the characters as if they're real people. So why do people do that with soap operas? And they have for many, many years. Why did people, even during a period when people were very, very poor, still part with money to go to the Nickelodeon? Why would you do that to go see a movie when you don't have enough money to eat? So these are much more pressing questions than why are you snapping a picture of yourself? But it turns out that there's lots of social reasons people do this, cognitive reasons and social reasons. And so not so many people have done that with selfies, but there is this kind of thought of why. Why would you take a picture? The most common answer to that question has been because you're a narcissist. I find that to be a fairly shallow explanation. I mean, Narcissus, couldn't get away from his own image, but I mean, I have looked into a pond and managed to look away. Narcissus got stuck there, but that doesn't mean everybody who looks in a mirror is stuck there forever. So, sure, narcissists may take a lot of selfies, but that doesn't mean that everyone who takes a selfie is also a narcissist. In fact, the opposite might be just as bad. I mean, I've met people who don't look in the mirror and don't shower, and they aren't exactly the most socially adjusted people I know. So there is a happy medium there between people who don't have any care in the world about how they look and those who care way, way too much about how they look to the people around them. We present ourselves to the world. We do that in real life. When we leave the house, we run a comb through our hair if we have hair. We try to make ourselves presentable. We try to form an image of ourselves for the people around us. We do that in real life. Everyone does that in real life to a greater or lesser degree. I'll note that this generation spends a lot less on self-care products, on things like makeup and product than the generation before it did. So if you want to make the argument that millennials or anyone under 30 or however you want to define it are somehow more narcissistic than my generation or the generation before me was, I just don't buy that. They spend a lot more money and time on making themselves look a certain way than this generation does. So it's a different kind of presentation of self. It's a different kind of construction of that. But I don't know that it's more or less. Part of it, though, is that we now present ourselves not just to our in-person connections, but in many ways to a much larger group of people online. So I may not go out of the house all day and still be engaged socially. And so that's a different kind of presentation of self. Certainly I'm trying to shape my image, but I'm shaping my image online because I can, and because that's where I interact socially. That's where I am presenting myself. And so the comb is the tool for when you're interacting with people in person, and the phone is the tool, the good selfie is the tool when you're interacting online. The term personal branding kind of feels ugly because we have a bad impression of branding in general and PR and marketing, because it seems like it's the aim of it is to separate you from your money. And so saying that you're marketing yourself, branding yourself, sounds icky, even to me still. But it has become more and more important when we are all a kind of micro-celebrity. There was a blogger named Mighty Girl who appropriated the earlier 15 minutes of fame and said that everyone is famous among 15 people. And so there's a new version of celebrity where a very small fan base might celebrate you. And you probably feel responsible to that fan base in a way that even a big star might. So you craft your image for that group. You brand yourself. And part of that branding is your visual look. It's how they identify you. It's how you are. You have your face. It's the one asset that you're born with that they really can't take away from you. And so your branding message probably does revolve around how you look, how you speak, and those pieces too. But how you look is that first impression. It's how you're wrapped. So it's not just narcissism. Part of it is that social connection. Letting people know who you are, letting people know what you're like. The selfie isn't just of your face. It's often of your face in context or your face with other people. Otherwise, you just take your one selfie and be done, right? It would be the perfect selfie, the ideal selfie. You would use it for everything. And that's not what people do. They often take selfies of where they are right now. And so that gives people more than just what you look like. It gives them what you like to do. It gives them an idea of who you like to hang out with. It gives them an idea of your emotions, how moody you happen to be, whether you like dogs or cats or chickens. It gives you kind of a snapshot of their lives. And so it is this way of communicating socially, beyond just saying, here's me, love me. It's a matter of saying, here's me. Do you like the things I like? Do you want to do the things I do? There's another piece of this, which is when I went to the Museum of Modern Art in, say, 2005-ish, I guess, I saw, for the first time, I saw large numbers of people taking pictures of the art rather than looking at the art. Now, there's a long history, of course, of painting the art, of doing a reproduction of the art to try to master the technique. That's a different thing entirely. But when you went to art museums in the last millennium, often you were there to look at the art. And now it seemed like they were not looking at the art, but trying to get a good picture of it, which seemed really, really strange to me. In particular, this image, short of Mona Lisa, is probably the most re-imaged, reproduced piece of art on the planet, and you're not going to take a better picture than you can buy downstairs or find online. So why is it that you're taking a picture of it? It made no sense to me at all. It was just really strange, and I noticed this in other places too, that certainly you could see this before to a much greater extent, but when you're on vacation, I would go to the Sagrada Familia or somewhere else that's a famous landmark, and nobody was kind of looking at it. Everyone was taking a picture of it. That made no sense to me. What makes slightly more sense is when you put yourself in that picture. There's lots of reasons you might have someone take a picture of you, which was the tradition, or take a picture of yourself in a location. One is just as a souvenir. Literally, the meaning of it originally is to remember something to remember your experience by. And so maybe that is what you're doing, right? Maybe you are using this as a memory, a way of creating memories and reminding yourself of that vacation and of the things you saw. I think there's something more to it than that. I will say that for a long time, I didn't carry a camera. When I traveled as a young person, I didn't carry one. And part of it was I didn't want one more thing to carry. But part of it was kind of a philosophical, I don't want to take pictures of things because it will shape my experience of what I'm doing. I will miss the ability to see stuff because I'll be too busy thinking about how to frame stuff. And so for most of my travels, when I was a young person, I don't have pictures of me in some pretty cool places. I have memories, and my memories are different than a photograph, right? I do have some pictures of, for example, I've been one of those weird people. There's a saying in Japan, the wise man climbs Mount Fuji once and the fool climbs it twice. So I've been up Mount Fuji twice. And both times I did take pictures, but it's completely different from my memory of those experiences. I mean, I have a great picture of the sunrise on Mount Fuji for my first climb. But on my second climb, there's a way you can come down the mountain on the volcanic ash side, and it's pretty cool because for the first 2 or 3,000 feet, you can just take these huge bounding leaps, and because if you fall, you're just falling into soft ash. So you can actually run down the mountain without too much injury to yourself. You just get ash everywhere, but that's okay. And I remember going down with a group of people that I knew. We climbed, the second time we climbed Mount Fuji, it was on a whim. We were drunk the night before and decided to go climb Mount Fuji. Not the best way to decide to do something ever. But, we decided to go down the Tsurubashi side where you got to run down the mountain, and we've been doing that for about 15 or 20 minutes and decided to sit down and take a break as we were we'd just come through the cloud cover, the cloud layer. And so the cloud layer kind of descended on us while we were taking a little snack, and as we looked in the distance, we saw this person in a purple suit carrying an umbrella bounding down the mountain, almost floating down the mountain. And I literally turned to someone and said, "Do you see that?" Because, it was through the cloud cover, it was through the mist, and it was bizarre. And yes, I could have taken a picture of that, but honestly, the experience of seeing that was much different than any picture I possibly could have taken of it. So we see things differently than our cameras see them. This is a famous essay that many of you have probably maybe read, from Walter Benjamin, called The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. There is some authenticity to certain kinds of art that photography, and certainly electronic photography, may have some significant difficulty in capturing. So it's a different kind of thing. But I can see why you would take a picture of yourself with the water lilies. It's for the same reason that people who visited the Sphinx wrote, "I was here, Alex was here," like chipped it onto the Sphinx. That's super annoying, right? I mean, people have been doing that at the Colosseum and at the Sphinx literally for hundreds of years. Have been either carving into it, or painting graffiti on it to say they were there. Why do people do that? Well, it's to make their mark in the world. And if you had to choose between that and snapping a picture of yourself with the Sphinx, I choose two, right? It's a way of saying, I've been here, I've made my mark on the world, I've walked this place. And so I think some of it is that. It's a new form of graffiti. And like graffiti, there is an artistic component to this. Again, it's low. People have this high art, low art thing, and is making a duck face and shooting from a 45-degree elevated angle really art? Well, it's a kind of genre of art. Yes, it's a language around creating portraiture, and it used to be only the very wealthy could pay someone to paint them, and that might have seemed narcissistic, but rich people are often seen as narcissistic. So now everyone can have portraits and can have portraits daily, and there is a language around selfies. There's a language around portraiture, this new form of portraiture, and you can become a selfie expert. You can become very good at taking a selfie, of matching the expectations and the language of the selfie. I mean, there's a reason that Instagram blocked uploads of. I mean, you can obviously do it. You can take a picture, load it onto your camera, and then load it up to Instagram. But initially, cameras were not as cool on cameras. Cameras were not as cool on phones, and it was a conscious decision of Instagram to say we're not going to be on the web. We're only going to allow you to upload photos from your phone, because you were going to take pictures with your phone, and that's how you're going to upload it. And so early Instagram photos were not as good as what you could get out of a camera. And so there is this now that's not true, of course, because people's phones cameras are almost as good as, are certainly much better than the old point and shoot cameras were. So, but there is this kind of, that's part of it as well. The machine you take a picture with, the kinds of angles you use, the kinds of poses you use for a selfie. The language of the selfie is a genre. It is a way of communicating. So those who are taking lots of selfies may be less narcissistic and more artistic. That is, people who want to engage in this particular genre of making art and can. I mean, I have kids. In fact, there's one back there. You probably maybe have seen him moving around because he's off school this morning. I have kids, and so I can take pictures of my kids. You want to say hi? No? Okay. I can take pictures of my kids, and that's not creepy, but And there's some people who date people who they can take pictures of or whatever. But honestly, for some people, their most willing subject is themselves. They can kind of, if they're going to create art, they can't go around and being creepy and take pictures of random people all day long. But if they take pictures of themselves all day long, the only person they're annoying is themselves. Well, maybe the people around them, but the only people they're annoying is themselves. And so there is something to be said of this as a kind of art form. There's another social piece of this, which is, the bad side of it is FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. But there's a good side of that too, which is saying, I'm doing stuff, right? And that may be showing off, I'm doing stuff and you're not, but often it's, I'm doing stuff and why don't you do it too? That is, join me in doing cool stuff. This is something cool. I've been to this restaurant. They have cool stuff. Why don't you go there sometime and do cool stuff too? It is, there's a TED talk about stepping up, right? The people who were doing in dance groups and had uploaded stuff to YouTube showing their moves, other people can say, oh, wow, I wish I was that good. But a lot of people say, that's pretty cool. I'm going to do that and I'm going to step it up one notch. And so some of it may be, one-upsmanship in this context is not always bad. It's kind of a social encouragement, a motivation to become involved socially and to go out and do stuff. My natural inclination is to stay at home. But if I see people out kind of traveling and taking pictures of themselves, right now many of my colleagues are in Prague for a conference, and yeah, I have FOMO for sure. But the other side of that is I really probably will try to go to the next version of this particular conference, right? That is, I want to step into that. And so it's a way of kind of shaping and encouraging my own role. Someone who did a study of why people watch James Bond films. And it's not just because they like to see Bond do these things, but because they imagine that they could model themselves after this and go and do those things themselves. So some of this may be kind of social learning, right? I can show people, I'm taking this picture because I want to show people something that they are able to do, that I'm being kind of a trailblazer. This is why I leave reviews on Yelp or TripAdvisor, right? So that people know what to expect and can say, oh, I would like to try that, or I don't want to do that, but I would like to try that. I'd like to go to that restaurant or go to that hotel or go to that place, right? So some of it is that social encouragement. It's a kind of life logging. It's a way of recording your life, a public diary. That's what a blog is, right? Or can be, at least, is a public diary, a way of talking about your life and your thoughts and that sort of thing. This is the same thing but visual. And while it can be self-involved, it can also be a way of opening yourself up to others and of engaging in a conversation. Here's my picture of this particular meal. Now let's see yours. Let's see what you would do. What restaurant are you going to? A kind of exchange of, hey, what's your life like? And honestly, it's pretty interesting that for those who have taken lots of selfies, I have a few images of myself in my 20s and maybe a couple in my 30s of major, I have pictures from my wedding, a few of them, right? But I don't have this daily record of what I looked like or of what the people around me looked like. And so there's something kind of exciting about that potential for an electronic diary that lasts through your whole life for not just one person, but for huge groups of people, right? There's something very interesting about what that means socially. Finally, there is this piece of it that is not just constructing a public view, but a way of coming to terms or discussing or revealing yourself to the public. So that's true certainly for someone who's introverted and can see this as a way of presenting themselves to a small audience or an audience to say, here's who I am, rather than like me, but here's who I am, and if you see something here you like, come talk to me. Maybe it's a way of introducing yourself. There are people out there who've said that it allowed them to come to terms with the things they didn't like about themselves, their scars or the shape of their face, or it allowed them to kind of process this in a public way and saying, I'm not ashamed of these things. This is who I am, and presenting that part of themselves as part of themselves. In other words, rather than concealing this, saying, this is the way I look. And there's some possibility of doing that. I think more broadly, it allows us to have an intimacy, a visual intimacy with people around us that we wouldn't have had before. that we get to see how people live, not just the stars, but people of all different backgrounds. What is it like to live in their world? And I think that's an exciting social possibility. And I think it probably makes us think about privacy in new ways. Because when you're taking selfies, you do have to think a little bit about what's captured and what's not. You have to think about who sees what and when. You have to think about whether you want future versions of yourself and future versions of people you know to see you, taking that bong hit when you're 19. Whether you want that to live with you for the rest of your life, whether that's what you want to be known for. All of these questions get wrapped up in selfie culture. And so I think that's part of it as well. So all of these mean that there are good reasons to think about selfies as something that's pro-social, as something that is a conscious choice, that it is not somehow, the way it is often portrayed in the media, pathologized, that it's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you if you want to take a selfie, as long as you get off my lawn.